Hallo und herzlich willkommen bei Coffee Break German.
Welcome back to the Coffee Break German Show. Ich bin Marc.
Ich heiße Thomas.
Wie geht's dir?
Sehr gut, Marc. Wie geht's dir? Alles okay?
Alles okay bei mir, ja.
Das freut mich. In these weekly episodes, we help you to improve your German one coffee break at a time.
And if you're enjoying the look of these mugs, you can get your very own mug. There is a link beneath this video. Or indeed, if you're listening to the podcast, then you can get a mug at coffeebreakgiftshop.com. Talking of which, if you're watching our video, then make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to the podcast, then please do subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a review if you can.
Please.
Also, was lernen wir heute?
We are kind of picking up from last week. We talked about location, destination, how that's different and important in German. And today we're looking at all the prepositions that we use depending on what destination or location we are talking about.
A preposition special.
Yes.
Los geht's. Thomas, I think one of the issues with this is the fact that when we are thinking about prepositions in English, we have at, to, in, on, and it kind of depends on the thing that we're talking about, at the beach, on the TV, and so on. But in German, it's a little bit different. There's a different distinction to be made.
Yes, so in German we're talking about zu, nach, an, in und auf today. And again, it depends very much what kind of noun follows afterwards. So that's like the kind of first question you need to ask. So are we afterwards? Is it followed by a building? And then it doesn't matter so much if it's a location or a destination. So in English, you would say in the building, but to the building.
Yeah.
In German, we don't have that difference. We use in for buildings, whether it's a location or a destination. And that difference we see when we use the case, if we say in dem oder in das Gebäude.
Yeah. So if you're wondering about that whole definition of prepositions, check back the previous episode, in episode 1 of season 2, where we did talk about that in and with the accusative versus in with the dative.
Genau.
Okay. So if it depends then on the category of noun that we're looking at, you said buildings or I guess
countries or open spaces or
so all of these are going to that's the first decision that we need to make, yeah?
Yeah.
So can we go through each of the prepositions and talk a little about what kind of categories of nouns we would use for each preposition?
Großartige Idee.
Okay,
let's do that. So the first one I wanted to look at is auf.
Auf. So I kind of think of auf meaning on. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, sehr gut. So you can use it, for example, for furniture, but also for things, for example, like islands or mountains that you're on top of.
Okay.
So to give you an example, we could say, legt sich auf die Couch.
Right. Legt sich auf die Couch. So that's sich liegen?
Sich legen,
sich legen, okay. So is he lying down on the couch?
Yeah, he's not there. He's in the process.
He's in the process. Down. Yeah, so he's not lying on the couch. He's lying down on the couch. So hang on, there's movement involved. That's how wohin, yeah?
Yeah, sehr gut. Well remembered from last week.
So that must mean that's an accusative, auf die Couch.
Genau.
Yeah, because otherwise it would be der Couch if it were dative.
Perfect. And because we're talking about furniture literally on it, then we have to use auf. And again, it doesn't matter here if he's already on it or if he's lying down. It matters if we use die Couch or der Couch, but our auf is the same for both of them.
Good. Okay.
Okay. A different example is also open spaces like squares or things like that.
Right. Okay.
So we also use auf there, for example, when we say auf dem Marktplatz, for example, ist viel los.
Oh, so los. We use los as in that sentence or that question. Was ist los?
Ja, oder los geht's.
Los geht's. Yeah. So what exactly does los mean?
If you say es ist viel los, it means it's very busy. There's a lot happening. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So es ist viel los oder auf dem Marktplatz ist viel los. The town square, the market square is very busy. There's lots going on.
Right. So there's lots going on the market square, but again in English we might say in the market square. So in German we need to use auf because it's an open space.
Yeah.
And then we've got that second decision as to whether it's, are we going into the market square or are we on
Ist
the
der
market
Location.
square?
Ja, genau.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, and for example, so all the Plätze use auf. So also Spielplatz would be another one where you use auf dem Spielplatz.
Okay, good.
Maybe one last example where auf is used a lot is, for example, when we say, meine Freunde gehen alle auf das Festival.
So they're going to a festival.
Yeah.
Okay, so you see an on the festival in German, auf. I think it's probably advisable to try to disassociate the German prepositions with English ones, because then we do think, well, we wouldn't say on the festival.
Exactly.
So we need to think more about the German categories, and so therefore a festival, that's something that you would use auf for.
Genau, so if you think events or some form of parties, then think auf.
Auf, okay. So if your friends are going to the festival, then there's direction involved, that's wohin, therefore that would be an accusative.
Sehr gut. Wohin gehen Sie? Auf das Festival.
I think I'm understanding this. Okay, let's move on to another preposition.
An.
Right, so again, an is sometimes can be translated by on, sometimes at, sometimes to, I guess.
But again, it's really helpful if you don't think literal translation, but just think in categories. And one of the big categories an is used is all things related to water.
Oh, right. Okay.
So if you're talking about a beach, a shore, the sea, the lake, the river.
It's always an.
It's all an. Yeah.
That's really good to know. So give us an example with that.
For example, im Sommer fahren wir an das Meer.
Okay. So that's a wohin. Where are you going to? In the summer, we're going to the sea, an das Meer.
Genau. Perfect.
Okay.
And again, it would be the same if we say, wir sind an dem Meer. We would still use an, but this time we would use the dative because we are already there.
So again, in English, we're thinking, we're going to the sea, we're at the sea, different prepositions. But in German, we've already made the decision that it's an because we're talking
something
about
water related.
Yay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So therefore, an. Another one where an is used a lot is if you're really close to something. So for example, if you say, ich stehe an der Haltestelle, for example.
So I'm standing at the bus stop.
Yeah. And
so
then
you're right there.
Exactly. And there the translation with at really works because you're like at something or.
So if we're at the microphone here, an?
Ja, genau. Wir sitzen am Mikrofon or ich sitze am Computer. I'm working. I'm sitting at the computer.
Yeah. And would that also be the case if you were moving towards the microphone? I'm sitting down at the microphone. Would we still use an, but with an accusative?
Ja, ich setze mich an das Mikrofon.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So that's an. When do we use in German?
Sehr gute Frage. So in mainly if we're talking about buildings or enclosed spaces. So we would say wir sitzen im Café, for example.
So we're sitting in the cafe, im Café. But again, I guess we could be going into something, but as long as we're going into a building or enclosed space, then it would be in plus accusative.
Genau, wir laufen in das Einkaufszentrum. So we're going into the shopping center, but still because it's like an enclosed space, a building, we're using in here.
So what other kind of situations would we use in that's not to do with a building?
It's also, again, it's kind of the idea that you're surrounded by something in the context of like a park, a forest or water. So we say, wir gehen im Wald spazieren.
Wald. Yeah, because I remember last time the deer were living in the wood.
Ja, ganz genau, genau.
Im Wald.
And the last one for in, which is a little bit special, it's all regions, countries or cities that have an article.
Oh, right. Okay, give us an example then.
So for example, wir machen einen Ausflug in den Schwarzwald.
So we're taking a trip to the Black Forest.
Genau.
In den Schwarzwald because we're going to it.
Yeah, and it's der Schwarzwald, so that region always has that article, and therefore we use in.
Yeah.
So it would be the same. Some countries have an article.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in der Schweiz.
Genau.
Yeah.
So there we would also always use in, whether actually we're going there or we are already there. It's always in because our region country has an article.
Yeah, so if we're living in Switzerland, wir leben in der Schweiz.
Perfekt, genau, Dativ.
And if we were going to Switzerland, it'd still be in.
Ja.
Wir fahren in die Schweiz.
Perfekt, Akkusativ, genau.
Good. Okay, so far so good.
Okay, if we keep the thought about like that, so far we've used the preposition whether it's a location or a destination, we've used the same preposition, and it just depends on what follows.
Yeah.
There's a few exceptions, and that is countries without an article. So we've just
Right.
talked about region and countries that have an article, but there's also the majority of countries doesn't have an article.
Yeah.
And here now we have to distinguish, are we in it? For example, ich lebe in Schottland. So we use in for all these regions and countries that don't have an article if we talk about the location.
Yeah.
But we use nach, which we
We're
also
going
came across
to-
last time,
Yeah.
if we talk about it as a destination. So ich
Right.
fliege nach Schottland.
Right. So ich lebe in Deutschland, ich fliege nach Deutschland,
Genau.
but ich fliege in die Vereinigten Staaten.
Oder ich lebe in den Vereinigten Staaten. So
Yeah.
here it's in both times because the country has an article.
An article.
So that's a bit tricky. And again, it helps if we think like, what categories are our noun in?
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's a country with an article, so we use in for everything. So again, thinking of those categories first, or we think, oh, it's a country without an article. That's one of the categories I need to be careful
Yeah.
because I either choose nach as a destination, so there's another choice you need to make afterwards, or I choose in if it's the location now.
Do you know what I think we need to do? I think we need to have a flow chart.
Yes.
I love a flow chart. So I think what we'll do is try to build a flow chart around this, and we'll put that in the notes that you can download. A free gift for you for this episode. How does that sound?
Großartige Idee. Gefällt mir.
Yeah, there's one preposition that we've not really talked about. Is there a reason we've not talked about zu?
Again, it's a little bit special. And the first reason is it's only used for destinations.
Uh-huh.
So again, it can't be used for locations
Yeah.
and destinations.
Yeah.
Destination only. And it can actually replace lots of the other one. It's quite a universal preposition that we can use. And it takes the dative,
Okay.
even though it's talking about destinations. We've talked about the last time, but zu, just remember, zu, dative, whatever happens.
Regardless. So when would we use zu? Give us an example with zu.
So we can use it, for example, again, for lots of events or festivals. So we could also say, wir gehen zu dem Konzert.
Yeah.
We also use it for all people or professions and institutions. So ich gehe zu meinen Eltern, ich gehe zu einem Freund,
Yeah.
but also ich gehe zu der Bank,
Right. And if you're going to the doctors,
zum Arzt, genau,
Arzt,
zu
ja.
dem Arzt, zum Arzt.
okay. And what if you're at the doctors already?
Sehr gute Frage, because exactly zu is only the destination.
Yeah.
If we talk about the location, we have to introduce our last preposition for today, and that is bei.
Bei. Right. So that's when you're already there. You're at your parents' house.
Ich bin
You're
bei
at the
meinen
doctors.
Eltern, genau. Ich bin
Right.
beim Arzt, ich bin bei der Arbeit.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a lot
Yeah, we
in
did.
this. Let me see if I can summarize things here. And if I go wrong, please correct me. We talked about auf.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, auf was used when you're on things, so on islands, on a roof, on a mountain top, and so on.
Exactly.
But once we've got auf, we still may have the decision. Well, we will have the decision as to whether it's a dative or an accusative, depending on whether there's direction involved, if it's a wohin, or whether it's a wo if you're already in there.
Exactly. And that determines what article do you use. Do you say, like, for example, dem or den?
Yeah. Then we talked about an, and an was for bodies of water.
Yeah.
All kind of things to do with water. And also when we're right close to something like a microphone or at the bus stop.
Genau, ja, perfekt.
We talked about in, and in is used for built-up spaces, so buildings or like the forest, or
Also,
would you use in if you were in a crowd, for example?
ja, ich bin in einer Gruppe. And again, it's this kind of enclosed,
You're
surrounded by it.
people. Yeah, okay. And in was also used for regions and countries with an article.
Sehr gut.
In der Schweiz.
Genau,
If you're
oder
going
dem
to-
Schwarzwald.
in Schwarzwald, yeah. And then we also used in with countries without an article, so in Deutschland.
Genau, but there needs to be kind of another thing that needs to be fulfilled, another condition that needs to be met.
Another part of our flowchart, yeah. So that's when that's an in. It's a location as opposed to a destination.
Genau.
Because if it's a destination, we use nach.
Perfekt gemerkt.
And then we talked about zu, which is a kind of catch-all preposition, yeah. But that's always going to use remind me,
The dative,
the dative.
even though it's only used for destinations.
Yeah. Okay. And by is also dative.
Mhm.
And by is when you're already there at the doctor's, at your parents' house.
Same.
and
It's
so
kind of the equivalent. So we had like those countries without article. We had in and nach,
Yeah.
location, destination, and by and zu is the equivalent for lots of other things, with the exception to just also uses the dative instead of the accusative.
Well, lots to think about, but we got there. So we hope that you've enjoyed this lesson and that you've found it useful. I've certainly found it useful, aber ich bin ein bisschen müde.
Das kann ich gut verstehen, Marc. Das kann ich verstehen.
If you'd like to see more examples, everything written down, and of course we've put together a blog article which will also include this flowchart that we've mentioned.
I think that will really help. It was a really good idea. And I'll promise you, we talk about something different next week, and you won't hear the words destination or locations from me for at least a couple of episodes.
Okay, so do check out the link in the description of this episode for our blog article.
Also, if you would like to have more help with your German, please sign up to our free regular emails and just visit coffeebreaklanguages.com/German.
And you'll receive that in your inbox very soon. Also, das reicht für heute.
Glaube ich auch. Bis zum nächsten Mal.
Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.
Happy Coffee Breaking.
You have been listening to a Coffee Break Languages production for the Radiolingua Network. Copyright 2024 Radiolingua Limited. Recording copyright 2024 Radiolingua Limited. All rights reserved.